Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by Matthias, who is an advanced photographer from Germany. Matthias says, I guess it's a classic that almost every photographer goes through. I bought a flower and I put a drop of water on it. Matthias says that the light here is coming from a window. So this is a natural light, window light. Shot this with a Canon EOS 300D, a Sigma 105 macro lens, and stopped down to f5.6, exposed the file for a sixth of a second on auto white balance, and shot this from the tripod. One thing I'll mention right up front, if you're particularly if you're just getting into photography, about the technical part of the discussion today is the lens. This is such a great lens for so many different reasons. I mean, it's great to have a macro lens like this with this kind of focal length that gives you good working distance from your subject, lets you focus very close, lets you get great magnification, typically 1:1 or somewhere close to 1:1, which means you can focus on things that are very small. And it's a great portrait lens. I have a Canon 100mm macro that's one of my favorite lenses to always have with me. I can shoot macro. I can also do great portrait work with it. And one other thing I'll mention is that both Sigma and Tamron make great versions of these lenses. That's what Matthias is shooting with here, the Sigma version of this lens, and it could save you some money over Nikon and Canon. Let's get into the image, which is gorgeous. Stunning colors here, real classic color pair here from the printer's color wheel, happening in a very, very vibrant way. Green and magenta. Kind of neat how that plays out into some oranges. Orange and green plays with each other very well. And the other thing that's fun is that colors like red and pink and magenta, they're so visually powerful that it can also play very, very beautifully in images that have a real dominant feeling of, let's say, a hot pink or hot magenta or primary red, to have black and to have white. Both of those are very, very powerful color ideas, and they play well with the real dominant colors on the color wheel. So really stunning from a color standpoint, stunning from a quality of light standpoint. So many macro shots do very, very well to have sort of a soft, broad light source, which window light can be. And I'm loving the feeling of sort of a luminous light coming from the window here. The other thing I love about the light here is the specular highlights that it's creating on the main subject, the bubble or the water droplet. These shapes are doing a beautiful job of rhyming the overall feeling of design that we're getting from the flower. And that's really stunning, a little stunning bit of unity there in the image. Great job of managing focus here. That can be tough. Shooting macro can be very tedious, and Matthias has done a beautiful job of leaving his main subject very sharp, and then everything else falls off. That helps to really simplify this image. And I think overall a beautiful composition. I like the way that both of the diagonals have a feeling of being used here and kind of cross-hatching as far as movement. Neat how the feeling of one side of the flower breaks things up. You know, one thing if you're just getting into photography to look at here that's a very powerful idea is just photographing a part of something. It can be real tempting, particularly when we're starting out, to become fascinated with objects and then just kind of just show the whole object, and coming in and showing a part of the object and letting the viewer make up a story about the rest of it is more of a cinematic kind of approach to photography, and can be very powerful. When I think about perfect world improvement for this one, I'd like to create a variation, and I say variation because I love this just the way it is. I'd like to look at a variation where we sort of deal with two things. This is really the only thing that's sharp, and then the plane of focus sneaks back in here under the water droplet, and you get some sharpness, almost perfect sharpness, on this little petal. But boy, it's just straight across right in the middle of the image. And if you're open to changing the editorial content of the image, I might come in and give this just a little bit of movement like this to kind of rhyme or mimic all of these other kind of dolphin shaped petals of the flower. And I might just soften that a little bit and give it a little bit of a curve. The other thing that's happening for me is this becomes pretty dominating. It's high contrast. It almost looks like another little flower out of focus, maybe, or maybe it's just a specular highlight. But it gets on par with the main subject and starts to create a little bit of a feeling for me like things are getting static. And pretty easy in this one to come in. Again, if you're open to changing editorial content, make a rough selection like this, which is what I did, and then scale it out and pull this thing out over here and pull this white part into the corner, create a little bit more of a feeling of this arcing around like that, and play off of the diagonal. And a big part of the reason that I'm wanting to do that is that this is the main subject, and with this starting to get on par with it, for me, it starts to compete with it a little bit, and I feel like if this was over here, that it could complement it on the diagonal. And so here we go. Copied the background as a matter of habit, and here is the layer where I just selected that real straight edge, and in this case I used Edit Transform Warp, and then I painted away the rest of my selection. Here's what the selection looks like, and here's what it looked like before the mask. You can see I had to warp the absolute heck out of it to get that line at the top to move. And here's the layer where I came in at the bottom and rescaled, so we can turn these eyeballs off and look at what that looks like before and after the mask. Just a big rough selection there, and I just scaled it out to the right. Look at it again in the context of the shot. There's before and there's after. And then I came in and I just did a couple of things. I set a true black point using curves, and the black point eyedropper in curves. I did that up here in the image, and then I came in and set a true white point and applied that locally. Here is where we started, and here is where we ended up. Now this brings up something interesting, which is once I did all this work, I thought, maybe I like Matthias's better. And you might think, well, who cares? This is really not what the daily critique is supposed to be about, and you're absolutely right. So why am I mentioning it? I'm mentioning it to give you another couple of takeaways, hopefully, from today's critique, which is the idea of the element of time in your editing process. And to me, there are a lot of different ways to think about it, but two very basic ways to think about it is, first, the amount of time you allow to happen from the point at which you make pictures to when you start to actually try to choose your top selects and maybe do an initial first edit. We can get so caught up in the reality of our experience, and it can be so hard to let go of some things about that. For instance, if we had to work really hard to get a certain picture, we might start to have a big emotional attachment to that image, and no one else has any concept that we marched 52 miles through the snow or whatever to get there. The other element of time to me is allowing time in your process to let's say pick your top selects and work on an image and have a first pass at it, and then let that sit for another day or two or maybe even three. What I find so much of the time is that I'm pretty good at picking my top selects, even if it's very soon after a shoot. I've been doing this long enough to where I feel like I've done a pretty good job of being able to let go of stuff that happened while I was shooting and quit thinking about what's outside of what I'm just seeing on my virtual light box. But I still find that if I edit images and then print them or give them to somebody, and I don't let the editing gestate for a little while and then come back and have a second look at it, that a lot of times I'll have quite a bit of regret. And so just wanted to mention that in the context of Matthias's beautiful image before I did anything to it. It's a real stunner from a color standpoint. Great macro shot. I want to say a big thank you to Matthias for sharing this image with us on the Mindful Eyes Daily Critique.